Board of Education, can I have you stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I just turn it over to you guys, right?
Yeah, so thank you tonight. We know it's a little bit of a different night, but we really wanted to get the board together. There's been a lot of work that's been done with the goal of getting to our next capital project. The current one, as you know, is well underway. Tony and Jesse and Callie are here, what we're calling a board workshop, because quite honestly, there's too much information to try and present this in one meeting. It certainly was a one agenda meeting, so we wanted to do a workshop, a little bit less formal and kind of conversational. You have a packet in front of you. There's extra packets for anyone who shows up who would like one. And we'll certainly post this stuff tomorrow and have it on the website. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Tony to walk through where we are and what we're looking to get through tonight.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for taking a summer evening off to come and talk about capital projects. Not always the funnest thing in the world for some folks, but I love it, so.
Me too.
Tony, hold on one
That
second.
shows.
Can we move you to Grace's spot? Because
Yeah.
Grace isn't coming. I think you're gonna need a
I
microphone.
got this one too.
Oh, you,
Oh, and we
There you
have
go.
a chair here too.
You guys can fully introduce.
well, he's gonna be doing most of the talking,
Kind
right?
of set up, so. it's-
Oh, that, okay.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks.
You guys just.
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, there you
Thanks,
go.
Michelle.
Wow.
Yes.
And then if they can,
Yeah, thank you.
there we go.
Oh, this one doesn't have an on and off.
That's all right, I got it over here.
He's got it, he's got it.
He's gonna mute you. So that's what he says. I have control. I like that. Thank you. We put together a 21-page PowerPoint presentation that consolidates a whole bunch of information. We like to walk through it to get all the way through it and can follow with questions. There's layers of this, so I'll make stop points to so you can ask questions. The presentation's objectives on the first page are really just twofold: to talk about the building condition survey, what that process is, what it does, what it means, and the information that's been delivered to the district by the design team. And then the second component is to talk about capital improvement investment options and how that works and how that would be considered as the board looks towards the preparation for a referendum in the fall. The things that we're going to cover tonight are the planning effort to date, what's been accomplished so far, and who's done what and in what sequence. The building condition survey review process after it's been delivered, how it's prepared and after it's been delivered and what we've looked at. A long discussion about needs versus resources. And I'll say the same thing I said several months ago when I gave an overview of capital planning in general. Is there's always more needs than there are available resources. The key is to find the best ways to prioritize and to make strategically well-informed decisions, not just for the current period, but for future periods. And we're going to talk a lot about looking to the future, where we are, how that relates to where we've been, and where we need to go. And this is all in the milieu of capital planning and capital improvements. The evaluation process that we undertook to look at the levels of investment and some options that we're going to present to you tonight, state aid and tax impact based on several scenarios that we've evaluated for discussion tonight. Finally, after we review the options, we'll talk about timeline and getting to potentially a referendum vote and the consideration steps that you will take as a body before we get to that place. So our next steps after this meeting will be to have a discussion on Monday at the 17th meeting to follow up, answer questions, bring more information, whatever's necessary to help you think this through. And then hopefully on the 15th of July, you'll make a consideration of resolutions that would move forward with a referendum presentation to the voters sometime in the fall. Okay. Any questions about the agenda? Okay. So let's talk about what's been completed to date. Many of you know, but maybe not all of you know, that we've been undertaking a building conditions survey process with the contemplation of what does that mean for our capital improvement referendum, in addition to what we already have underway, which we're about 50% complete. What have we done? Well, first and foremost, we started the building condition survey. We started that in January of 23. We completed that process in March of 24. And I really would like Jesse and Callie just take a quick moment to talk about what they did, how they did it. It was a Herculean amount of work. A lot of 7 buildings, 600,000 square feet of building area, countless acres of site improvements evaluated, a whole team of people, and did an exemplary job. I've been through many building condition surveys, and this is one of the most thorough, detailed, and well presented that I've ever gotten to take a look at. So I'm really pleased with the work. Just want to share that with you guys. Tell them what you did.
Sure. So we did the bulk of the work last summer while the students were, is it on? I don't know.
It's on.
Okay. We did the bulk of the work last summer while students were not in the buildings. And so we walked through every single room in every single building, roofs, basements, inside, outside, all of it. We do a walkthrough, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers do a walkthrough, and then the site engineers do a walkthrough as well. So through that, we are taking notes, we're taking photos, and assessing sort of the remaining useful lifespan of all different sorts of materials and systems within the buildings. And then after that, we put together a pretty lengthy form that the state requires us to put together that also assesses the remaining useful lifespan and starts to put some cost estimates to things that need to be updated. And we also put together a pretty lengthy spreadsheet, which is what formed this process.
And that's the part that I liked, because it was detailed, super detailed. Do you want to talk a little bit about the team? Because I'm not sure everybody understands Mosaic and all your sub-consultants. You want to just walk through who the team members are and who participated?
Okay. So Mosaic, we handle all of the architectural items, the walls, doors, windows, finishes, structure, things of that nature. And then we have mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. We use a company called Engineered Solutions. We've been using them for, I think, 40 years now for most of our projects, have a great relationship with them. So they send out separate mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers to review their respective trades. And they do that. They also talk with facilities to hear, have you had any problems? Have you had any leaks? How are your boilers doing? Things like that. And then we also have a site consultant, Appel Osborne. They are civil and landscape architects, and they reviewed all of the site, the fields, the pavement, all of those sorts of things to determine the useful life of that. You'll see there's a fair amount of site stuff in here.
Quite a bit. And again, for both of those two sub-consultants, exemplary job, very good personnel, great history, and really thorough evaluation. So we have a lot of very good information from them. That's the foundation stone upon which this whole presentation and evaluation has been prepared. So after the process was well underway, we started meeting with district administration and our board facilities committee last fall and started to talk about the process of what do we do with this information when we get it and what's it likely to say. And a lot of things were well anticipated by district staff and others who know the buildings. Other things were more detailed and deeper dives that produced insight that we didn't otherwise have. So we got to see things holistically over a period of time, really between fall and spring. We did a technical review of those systems and those issues and started to prioritize needs. And that's a part of the process. And you'll see that in a slide coming up about priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it sets a structure and a hierarchy of needs, so to speak, with regard to the types of improvements. So we'll talk about that by building and by priority. Over the latter part of the fall, early part of the winter, we started the cost estimation and compiling information, and the cost detail came more and more together and really gelled between March and April. And then finally, we're also working with our fiscal advisory group called Fiscal Advisors to look to them to start to give us some insight as to what orders of magnitude might be the result of this process and how it might translate into tax impact as a potential project was formulated. So we've been working with them for the past 5 or 6 months to get them prepared and to run scenarios. So we really have a whole team of people that have been putting together a lot of information to now present to you, what does it all mean and how do we look at it? So the last part of this process is for us to present and give you a full understanding of this, and then to present these options so that you can think about what should be the priorities of the investment from your standpoint, some recommendations on hierarchy from us, and then talk about these financial impacts. Timeline, assuming that we can get to a place where the board feels comfortable by July 15th on proposing a resolution, that would require 2 or 3 things. One includes an environmental impact process, which we've already undertaken. And for the types of improvements we're talking about, there is no environmental impact. We still have to go through a process under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And that process will be completed by the 15th so that the board could take action at that meeting. That's the first step. The second step is to adopt a resolution which would set a proposition vote for a referendum being presented to the voters at a future date. It would identify the general scope of what that referendum investment would be and the costs that would be associated with that authorization that you're asking the voters to approve. And we've selected a date that is in September as a proposed date, September 24th, and there's a reason for that. A fall action is ideal for us to be able to get the work started if the voters approve as quickly as possible and to make this seamlessly flow through with the existing referendum project, the $28.5 million project, so we can just continue straight forward. Lots of efficiency and cost savings in that, so that's part of the motivation. Secondarily, there's a general election this year, and election machines are impounded starting at the beginning of October. So we wouldn't be able to get those machines back until sometime in December. So there's a kind of a blackout window for the general election. So it's either by the end of September or waiting well into December. And December votes are sometimes to be difficult because of weather and other things. So those are some of the considerations why we propose the 24th, and that's what's on your schedule. If the voters were to approve this, and this is a generic, we don't know what the full scope is. I said this at our last presentation. These things don't happen overnight. Once there's an authorization, then the design process starts. And there's a sequence of events. We haven't designed anything. We've just identified areas of investment based on existing conditions. So we have to actually go through a design process that can take 6 to 12 months, more likely 12 than 6. There's a process then to submit to the State Education Department for their review. We wish that would be a month or 2. It's been 6 to 12, so that takes additional time. Then 2 or 3 months for bidding, then the start of construction, which will likely last 2 or 3 summers. So if the voters are to approve a referendum in the fall of 24, it's highly likely that this project would not be completed until the end of 29 or early 30. So that window of time needs to shape your perspective about investment, because decisions today may not be fully realized until the beginning of the 2030s. And that's a big time frame. So it's not the average thing that you think about or a taxpayer thinks about necessarily when they say, should we or should we not approve that kind of investment? We have to educate the public about this duration and time frame. It's not the first time the district's done it, but when we think about the types of things that we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to put that in perspective with the past 20 years of investment that the district's made in its facilities, you'll understand why this is a very, very important consideration this fall. Very, very important.
When is our current project scheduled to end?
So we're a year ahead of schedule. So we're planning on finishing by the end of 25. It was originally planned to finish the end of 26.
26.
So we're hopeful that we'll be able to roll right in and continue construction in 26 and just keep going 26, 27, 28, 29.
Okay, thanks.
So if we skip to page 5, we'll talk a little bit about the building condition survey. And again, 7 buildings, 663,000 square feet of work that was identified, again, as Callie and Jesse said, of existing conditions and what those systems and building elements as they stand today are likely to need to be replaced, repaired, or removed and replaced. And those things fall into 5 categories. Things related to health and safety, which we call urgent and critical, obviously, for the nature of that. Critical maintenance issues is priority 2, things that need to be addressed in 1 to 5 years generally. There are exceptions, some sooner, some later, but that's a reasonable time frame. Priority 3 are generally related to programmatic needs and accessibility. Not that accessibility is important, it also drives around program. So these are desired or recommended. Priority 4 would be energy efficiency issues, and again, desired or recommended. And then priority 5, things that are coming up on a life expectancy, the useful life of a particular building system, a roof, a boiler, a mechanical system, a finish condition. Overall, 384 items were recommended for action in this report, and they totaled $114.856 million. Of the priorities, the highest priorities, $39.858 million, or 34% of the total building condition survey estimate, are the highest priority. So that's a lot of money that's in this first bucket of urgent need. If you flip to the next page, you'll see a complete summary, building by building. And I'm going to take a little bit of time to walk this through because I think it will guide most of our conversation for the rest of the night, perhaps the next several weeks. The mosaic summary lists each one of the buildings on the left-hand side. It lists the total value of investment by building, and then it breaks it down by each priority by building. So Averill Park High School has $37.94 million of all priority building condition survey with desired improvements. When I say desired, these are recommended. Priority 1s are only 18.6 million of that 37.9. Priority 2s are 14.446 million. Priority 3s, 1.56, 4s, 2.97, and priority 5s, a relatively small 342,000 in comparison to the others. Obviously, the high school is the largest area of need. Typically, the 912 building is always the largest area of need because it serves the entire student population in those grades. Algonquin next at 15.7 with 8.354 million in the first priority. George Washington, first of the 4 elementary schools, 7.3 million total, 1.279 in the highest priority. Miller Hill, 16.147 million, 5.194 million in the highest priority. Post and Kill, 15.22, priority 1, 1.238, West Sam Lake, 18.264, and priority 1, 3.233 million. And then finally, the bus garage, 4.237 million, 1.948 in the highest priority. The reason I'm focusing on the highest priority right now in this discussion is, as an order of magnitude, it's a gigantic amount of money to begin with. And I think we have to start the conversation about balancing resources and needs. So we're focusing primarily the discussion today, not to drive you to just this, but to explain that we see some reasonableness to focus on highest priority first and talk about things in relationship to the highest priority. We can certainly move the line farther to the right and encroach into priorities 2, 3, and 4s. But as you see, as you go into priority 2, the total for priority 2 is $59 million. Add the two together, we're approaching $100 million in investment in just those top priorities.
Oh, that's not cumulative.
That's correct, cumulative.
Yeah, so what's going on in the elementary schools that all of a sudden they have these priority 2s that are critical maintenance? They're huge numbers in that priority 2.
They are.
All 3 of them.
They are, and that's the perfect question for this point in the conversation, because this has to do with the overall flow of time and how buildings change over time. So if you looked at this as a distribution of need, priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In an ideal world, a building owner, like you as the Board of Education, would want to see a bell curve, so that your priority 1s are relatively low, 2s are mounting and they're moving toward becoming priority 1s. 3s are in the middle because they've got a more bigger window, and it tails off at the end. Our buildings are not in that condition. Our buildings are in a wave of aging and progressive deterioration where that distribution is pushing much more closely to the current level. So the smallest number of highest priority items, the priority 1s at 39 million, is right up against we need to act. But right behind it is this large wave of impending need, and it's grown and it's huge. And it has to do with life cycle. So when we invest, and that's why I said, think about the investment, it's 2024. We're talking about completing this project in 2030 or 2029. The decisions we make today affect how much of that money in category 2 is gonna push into category 1. And then where will we be, or the board who sits here in 2030 will be, with what's about to come to them, with the next level of progressive, important investment. That's the fundamental issue. I'm gonna say it now in a way that I'm gonna try to couch it the right way. There have been historically good investments made by the district, but they've been very constrained. And part of that constraint, and I think it's a relationship to the community, we're very prudent and fiscally conservative in this community and always have been. I grew up here, I know that, it's a part of me too. That has not helped us with regard to the long-term stewardship of the properties. And we have now come to a point where we're at a kind of a crescendo event with certain types of building systems, and we're gonna talk about that. And that's why we have so much in priority 1, and that also has, to your point, Jesse, a large mounting wave in priority 2. So this isn't a really important time for consideration of things. And we can talk historically about where the investments have been in the past and where they've been limited and what that has meant for accumulation of deferred maintenance that was, and I think this, Jamie mentioned this at one point when I came back into the project a couple of years ago. I walked the building as I came back in after having my kickoff meeting with the superintendent team. And I walked in, and my kids graduated 10 years ago, so it's been a long time since I've been back in the building. There were things that I saw that I thought for sure 10 years ago were gonna be completed right away. And it was 10 years later, and that was 2 years ago, and they still haven't been done. Those things snowball, and they grow, and they don't just stay stagnant by themselves, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we have some of those things, we're gonna talk about them. And we're gonna give some recommendations on how to tackle those things so that we spend the least amount of money to get the biggest bang for our buck. So we resolve the hole that we're sliding into. And we are sliding into a hole, and you'll see that.
Well, how does that happen? You slide the phones?
You had asked about, we
Not that it
had,
changes where we're at, but I just think it's good to understand.
well, the last time, I mean, does this, can I just riff off that, because that was my question, was, is this piggybacking on the last time we went out to the voters and it got voted down and we had to scale back? Like, are we seeing some of the effects of that? Are there things that are?
That's possible, but I think it's broader than just the last referendum. We did, if you look backwards, we did a referendum in 2013, it was about 13 million, 12.9 million. And in 2007, we did one that was about 13.1. And the referendum prior to that was a $19 million referendum, it was in 2001. In each time, there was a very big focus on making this as tight and as small as we could make it, given the consideration. When you do that over a 20 or 30 year period, there's things that are being pushed out.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. The things that got pushed out got to become not just a maintenance issue, not just a small repair issue, now are a reconstruction issue, remove and replace. And those are some of the things that are coming up. And that's why we are where we are. Where we want to be is we want to resolve those issues, tackle them, resolve them, clean them up. And then we want to be in a position where every 5 years we're doing a regular, moderate, balanced, small level referendum. It's just maintenance basically, that keeps us level and steady and not having these big jumps and having to spend a lot of capital dollars with tax evasion.
I'm sorry, this is probably a stupid question, but we had this money set aside, or this is what we have to go to the voters. So, because this is literally probably the worst climate since 2007 to be doing this. Okay.
It is 77%.
That was
I
my
didn't
question
say
right there,
part.
thinking about.
Yeah.
So-
But
so-
I speak a
How
little bit
silly
of the
were
world.
we when we were doing,
Well,
right, a
it's not
$20
good.
million project and we had 99 or 95% aidable.
Hold on though,
That was silly.
I'm gonna take a second though and say, I wanna focus on the future and not necessarily focus on any Monday morning quarterbacking, because at the moment that the prior decisions were made, the climate could have been very different. And I don't want this to become a somebody else should have. We are where we are, so let's focus on the solution and move forward.
Oh, and I think, yeah, well, like, how do we inform, and then is that part of the messaging?
I agree. My recommendation is learn from the past, understand where we are, and make
Yeah.
good informed decisions.
I
going
completely
forward.
agree, but when people come to us and ask us, I wanna have a intelligent, coherent, understandable answer, and it can't just be like, I don't know, we're not gonna worry about it, we're just gonna move forward.
That's
People
not-
are not gonna
That's
wanna
not what
hear
I
that
said, but it
response.
wasn't, you weren't here, I wasn't here, so I can't speak on what the motivation anybody had for what they did in 2007.
Yeah, I'm not talking about speaking of motivation, just sort of the facts.
And I can tell you that this is not unique to your school district
It's not.
whatsoever.
Okay.
This happens across the board. You have it, schools are humongous facilities and it's just really hard to keep up. So please don't think that it's just you. This
Absolutely.
happens everywhere.
I also think.
So
Sorry,
isn't that since the state government began reducing aid, schools have been reluctant to be able to invest in maintenance, and therefore stuff is breaking. It's just that simple, I think.
Very, very true. And there are lots of considerations that affect decision. There's existing debt, there's other operating expenses that are, happening at the same time. There are a lot of considerations why things are decided the way they are. And every district deals with them and encounters them in different sequences too. But in the end, if you accumulate a lot of deferred maintenance, you're going to get to this position, and that's kind of where we are. So we are where we are. Now let's understand it and figure out how to step forward effectively.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, just to piggyback on Tony's comment in response to Jesse's initial question about the large costs and the priority 2 items, in addition to the older items that haven't quite been addressed yet, I think we're also seeing for the first time in this BCS, the effect of, you guys did a lot of building additions and work in like the mid-90s. And that 30-year time span, we're starting to approach where some building systems just start to come due for maintenance, and they weren't necessarily on our radar
Super
before
accurate.
because you were within the time frame that they still had a lot of functionality. So this is kind of the first that some of those items are popping up on the list.
And I just said that.
Happen all
makes
at
sense.
once.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of work, so there's
Right.
a lot of,
Right.
numbers of, you start to count classrooms and things.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, so
I
I'm
just
sure, oh, sorry. You go
Maybe,
first, and
well,
I'll- you go.
No, I don't, maybe I don't wanna jump ahead, but at what point did the state stop aiding at 95% and drop it back?
20 years after the merger?
Yeah, we had a longer period than we probably were due. So we got a pretty good bang for our buck out of that. And I think it was maybe 5 or 7 years ago. It's relatively recent, but it's, I think typically it's a 20-year period, and I think we got a little bit more
It was
road
late
out of that.
90s when we had that phone call.
And that does change the paradigm, right? So there's also kind of a reluctance because now it's very much more significantly borne by the local taxpayer. So there's a reticence to do that. But your point is really well taken. We have a whole group of investments that occurred in the 90s that are now hitting their 30-year mark. And those things are now need to be replaced, refurbished, and enhanced, and will certainly need it by the end of this period.
I guess my question, you're probably going to answer it. In fact, I'm like 99.99% sure, especially having worked with you guys. But what we're sort of looking at, presumably, if we can squeeze it somehow, is the priority 1, and then there's going to be like a disaggregation of the priority 2s, right? So we can we can, assuming that we're not gonna do 39 plus 59, and like, okay, good luck to us, that we can at least dig into some of that priority two. without-
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, so
Yeah,
let's,
that's what- yeah.
let's continue,
So, yeah.
continue through. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. I'm gonna focus on, in a very significant way, on an area of improvements that are one of those areas that have been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And it's our number one need in the district, and it's site work. Paving, curbs, sidewalk are a disaster. And that's a technical term. We have pavement that is so used up that we can't put our plow blades down in the winter on it, or it will literally all just be plowed up. We have potholes that are deeper than wheels on a car. We have a likelihood for personal injury and property injury on a regular basis that's now no longer could happen, it is happening. And the ability to patch and repair doesn't exist anymore. Further, the pavement systems that we have are so deteriorated that for the most part, they really need to be completely removed and fully rebuilt, as opposed to what we would call just a mill and overlay, where you take up the asphalt, you treat it and put it back down, and that gives you a breather before you, we're, you know, most of our lots and roadways really need to be completely torn down to basic paving dirt, brought back up with new base, reconstructed fully. And that's the recommendation that we're gonna be talking through. This is the baseline on this, and it's the site plan. So we put together a site plan for each one of the schools that shows the areas that we're talking about that need to be improved. And the high school and the middle school are certainly at the top of the pyramid, but every building has substantial need for reconstruction, or certainly significant reconstruction in a moderate way of paved areas, sidewalks, curbs, and even play areas. So working our way around the first page, I won't go through each and every one of these, you'll be able to read it at your leisure, but we're basically talking about a significant repaving of the loop road coming in off Gettle that feeds around back to the tennis courts and to the gymnasium entrance, that's in red. The district office parking lot in purple, what we call the bus atrium loop that takes us back out to Gettle Road. The entire front parking area at the front of the high school, the bus drive aisle, everything but the parking area that we installed in 2007, which is overflow. The rear parking lot in the back of the building would be completely reconstructed. We would also build an asphalt walkway along the perimeter of the building. That's part of the life safety. We need to plow up behind those classrooms. We're not really compliant right now. We need an accessible walkway to go around the back of the building. A little bit more paving around the track and out to the visitors bleacher for accessibility. And the construction of a paved roadway back to the baseball fields is pretty important, along with some supplemental parking. In addition, in the area that's immediately outside the gym area, this is an area that was a big concern for myself and Mosaic and the Pella Osborne team. We have a huge congestion of cars on a regular basis where there's too many cars, too many pedestrians that cross between anybody trying to park anywhere, to be honest with you, because there's not enough parking at the gym complex, and then movement of people between cars. It's a very dangerous situation. Whether it's a school event or it's a community event, it's a problem. We need to create more parking there. So we've come up with a way to put in the area immediately adjacent to the roadway that comes around. It's hard to see on this plan because it's small, it's so small. It's a new parking area, and we'll add about 60 spaces. We're also talking about adding 50 spaces along the ring road, the loop road that comes in from Gettle, again, to create more parking. We get 100 more spaces. It will be a dramatically better and safer location. And safety is probably the number one driver in this. I spend a lot of time here on the weekends too, and it's amazing how many people are utilizing our facilities. Very different today than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. It's just a huge amount of utilization. That's a quick overview of the high school. Let's move on to Algonquin. Algonquin, I think most of you know, the high school was built in 1957, the Algonquin was built in 1966. But for 2 renovations, really haven't had any real site work. So one occurred in the 90s, and the other was a smaller work on site paving that occurred in 2003. So the roadway from 351 at the bottom of the page to where the new gym is, that was installed in 2003. That's 20 years old. And it's in relatively good shape, I think, at the base, but the surface needs to be completely replaced. The rest of the circulation areas all go back to the last major project that was done by the BBL team in 97. So this is a long time since it's been really improved, and it's in horrible shape. The circulation road is literally falling apart all the way up to 66. We've repaved a couple times to patch and repair around the drop-off, but all of that area and the main parking needs to be redone, as does the west parking. The loading area that's by the shops and the cafeteria loading dock is significantly falling apart. That's got to be rebuilt. And we've included a paving of the road to go out to the access to the fields and a connection to the paved area in the back, again, for maintenance and security around the building. So that's the proposed plan for Algonquin.
I have a question. If we're gonna redo this parking lot, and will this happen in the design phase, can we think about how to better that drop-off loop? Just to, you don't need to answer it now, but would that be
I'm
the
totally fine
design,
with
in the
this.
design phase?
We've talked about it, yes.
Okay.
And we have some ideas about how to do it
Because if we're
better.
gonna do it, we should make it better.
The number one safety concern in Algonquin, aside from just kids moving around to get in and out of cars, is getting cars off of 66.
Oh,
And we think a much longer queuing line on site will alleviate that left turn sack up that happens between the intersection of 351 to the entrance. And that's, it's, I lived in Algonquin Estates for 15 years, and it's a disaster from the sightline standpoint. Speed, too much speed, not enough braking time, and people just parked ready to make a left. It's a bad situation.
If anybody had spent any time dropping a kid off at the high school or at the middle school, it makes it very hard for me to believe that we have reducing enrollment. I think more people are dropping their kids off. So many people.
I'm just doing a quick overview. There's a lot more deep dive. I'm just trying to hit the tops of the improvements. So let's go on to Miller Hill. Miller Hill is a building that you're going to hear a lot more discussion about. For the elementary schools, this school has been the most neglected over time for reasons I don't really understand, but it has the largest accumulation of significant investment because of deferred investment. And the site work is a part of that. And the point that Jesse brought up earlier, even the paving that was done back with the addition for the round gym and the extension of the original building back in the 90s, that's past 30 years as well. So it's understandable that pavement needs to be replaced. Curbs and sidewalks need to be replaced, in addition to the original circulation loop around the front of the original building. But in addition to that, the rear of the building is probably in the worst condition of all. So the play areas where the maple trees are, that fronts the back of the classrooms, that's just literally over time, over 30 or 40 years, it's just kind of washed away and is settled out, and it's got to be restored. It's unsafe. It's not in a condition that we would want it to be maintained in, and it needs significant reconstruction to be brought to a standard that's reasonable. So that's something we're going to put as a high priority as well.
Can I just ask, is the paving plan, is that all part of the priority 1 and priority 2?
Yes.
Yes, okay, and is there any delineation between what's in red and what's in blue in terms of priority?
You want to speak to that?
No, I think the red and the blue on these plans is more just a graphic representation so that you can sort of see at this small scale the difference between, where the paving in the roadway ends and the concrete at the sidewalk begins.
Okay, but everything we're talking about in terms of the payment plan would be part of that tier 1?
They are in priority 1, yes, absolutely.
I understand how like the building stuff would be unsafe. What makes the sloping in the back unsafe?
It's eroded if you've ever been back there.
I have.
Yeah, it's not a solid, level, stable surface. It's clear. If you look where the stairs come out of the back classrooms, and you look where that hill edge used to be level with those stairs.
Okay.
So you see, does that give you a frame of
Yeah.
reference for how much it's changed over
Yeah.
40 or 50 years? Yeah, it's very, very different than it was originally designed to be.
Jim, how much of the property do we own? Do we go into that field at all, or is that,
The lower field?
Yeah.
We own the entire lower field.
we own it?
Yeah, all the way
All
over
the way
to
to
the
the
parking.
playground?
Yeah, all from the, so if you're looking at the plan, so I'm speaking of just this red area.
Right, I was
This
just curious how
area
much
is-
that we own.
This area we own, it was all reconstructed in 2003, and that's in fine shape. You know, there could be some improvements here, we're not even putting that on the list. This is the area that's in highest need.
Okay, I was curious if we owned the whole loop, like, kind of, but yeah, into the.
Pretty much,
Yes.
this is the area that we don't, if you're familiar with that, so just what's around Old St. Luke's.
We don't own that. This is what we don't own.
You don't own the apartments.
The parking lot for the apartment.
Yeah, you very much don't own that.
If we can move on to West Sand Lake. West Sand Lake, you know, our oldest elementary school with many additions, has significant traffic flow problems. Part of that is contributed to because we don't have significant enough paved area. So there's some expansion of paving and restoration of paving area that's in the front of the drop-off. If you've ever been on, as you face the building on the left-hand side, you know that when it rains, it becomes a lagoon because there's not sufficient drainage there. That needs to be repaired and replaced. And on the right side of the building, the main parking lot is in fairly good shape. It needs, listed as reconstruction, but we may be able to get away with, we'll call modified reconstruction of that area. There is some drainage that has to be taken care of in that area. And then, of course, the play area, the paved play area needs to be restored.
Sorry, you said the one when you're facing the building looking to the right is not that bad?
The one to the right is not that bad.
Because that's the one like where it rains, that whole back, every time it rains, like that whole back row is like completely flooded.
This is, but in comparison, this whole area
It's
floods.
worse.
Worse. So, and most people don't go back there because it's really where staff parks and where the
Right.
maintenance guys are.
Right.
Where they get out 6 and 3 inches of water
Yeah.
to get in the building.
Yeah, no, but it's not a joke, because even on the other side,
Oh,
like
yeah,
that
it
that
does,
whole
yeah.
third row,
Yeah.
anytime it rains, like, we're not talking runoff, we're
Yeah.
talking like you can't park there to pick up your kids,
Yeah.
and there's nowhere else to park.
So one of the strange things about most school sites is that they're in low areas. And this is not just us, it's everywhere. Because it's land that people wanted to get rid of and it was easier. Now this happens to be, this is not, this was a historic area. There was a racetrack there. There was a lot of things that happened over the years. But it is a low point and has always been a low point. And that's part of the reason it has the drainage issues it has. They can be fixed.
I would say, will doing this fix that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, it's helpful to know, because
Yeah.
people are gonna ask that.
100%.
That one's like, no, I know.
We're getting to the end. Post and kill. Post and kill, we dealt with most of the drainage issues 20 years ago. So the things that plagued the back classrooms, that has been healed. The trailer's gone, so there's been a lot of things here. But that doesn't change the fact that the main entry loop and parking area hasn't been replaced in over 20 years. And it needs it. Same conditions, same reasons. And then George Washington. We did do some paving there in 2003. There needs to be a repavement work. It's been 20 plus years. There's also a significant need for sidewalk restoration, and we should put a pedestrian path that's paved to get kids out to the play equipment from the building itself. So that wraps up the buildings, educational buildings. The last building is the bus garage. And the bus garage pavement is original, with some patching that's occurred over the years, but it's original. And that takes from the entrance road off of Gettle all the way around the building. And there's even some unidentified on this plan work that needs to be done at the intersection with 43 coming in the service road there.
Would you propose, you only have part of that color, you're not gonna propose to repave the whole from
We
Gettle over to,
we aren't, because we're trying to constrain costs.
okay.
So we're hitting the areas that are of the highest need, and this not being an educational facility and having limited aid, we're focusing on the things that we think have to be done in order to have a maintainable area for our buses, but not going an inch further than we need to.
Okay.
So that's the way we approach this.
Thank you.
The bus garage is emptyable?
It is aidable, but it has a lower aid and it's significantly lower, so we want to keep an eye on that investment.
Okay.
Well, and,
Because we just play around with those buses at our leisure, they're not used to.
The good
I
news,
don't take kids in the buildings.
the good news, and just to clarify, we put, this is to the district's credit. In the $28.5 million referendum, we restored roofs. We replaced all the overhead doors. We did work on the boilers. We replaced some of the man doors that go into the area. So we've made an investment in these buildings, and we're about to put in it's an added scope of work that we were able to fund through savings in the $28.5 million project that have been accrued. Close to $1 million of investment in replacing the bus lifts. And that's a huge safety issue again for our workforce. So the district's done a great job of, I think, addressing this facility, especially from my perspective. There's a lot of people here who've been around this one that I have. When we didn't have a bus garage, and we used to park the buses outside, and it's a whole different world today, right? So it's so much better, but we need to maintain this. And right now, we can't plow the lots well, and that does affect ins and outs all the time. And that's because the pavement's just used up. It's easy to replace.
question, about the bus facility as it relates to the ludicrous idea that we should go to electric fleet by 2035. The paving also has to be able to withstand the heavier weight of the electric buses. So we would have to, account for that within this project, right?
Yeah, and we will definitely do a design that contemplates that future additional, use and load. It won't be significantly more expensive because of it, but if we do the reconstruction rather than mill and overlay, we'll be able to address it much more completely. And that will give us a longer life on that system. So there's always benefits to doing a little bit more and thoughtfully now than doing less and having to deal with what less means later.
Which is why I was asking if the rest of the road.
Yeah. We can add it back in. We've been very cautious.
Yeah, no, understood. I just was
So
curious as to why that.
I'm going to start to put this more in perspective. So everything I just showed you are things that are in our priority one category, not priority twos, and we think are at the top of the pyramid. It's a substantial amount of investment. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to put it in context with a quick overview again of the priority one costs. 18 million at the high school, 8 at Algonquin, and then you can see the rest of the elementary schools, close to $40 million. Use this now as your framework. This is just priority ones. We're going to talk about how our district's investment, with that in mind, compares to other neighboring districts or districts of similar size.
Sorry, Tony, quick question. So for the close to $40 million, that's just the paving and land stuff?
It's all priority ones. It's building
So
and
there's
site
additional
improvement.
priority?
Yes, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Thanks.
So with that framework, and again, I was trying to get the sense of the most urgent and critical is about $40 million. I wanted you to see how that concept and what we've invested recently in the past 15 years compares with other neighboring or similar size school districts that are around us. East Greenbush just passed a $116 million referendum that was on the heels of 7 years ago, a $39 million referendum. So they've invested $155 million in their district buildings now over the past 7 years. And I'll probably take them another 5 to 6 years to complete that investment. Burnt Hills, Boston Lake has had 3 referendums since 13 that total $120 million. Niskayuna just passed in February, the third of a series of referendums since 2016, $131.8 million. Mohonasen, since 2009, $69.8 million. South Glens Falls in the past 7 years or so, actually 9 years, sorry, about $91 million. And for us in that 15-year period, we passed a $12.9 million referendum in May of 13, and of course the 28.5 that we're currently in October of 21 for $41 million. The reason I think that's important to understand is not just the quick other people are spending money and it looks like more than we are. These other districts, the point that Callie and Jesse raised, are in the same kinds of circumstances. And they're looking at their facilities and they're making investments. Every district has different conditions, that's for sure. But there is a result of the inability to find the ability to invest in your facilities snowballs. And we're clearly watching other districts with the same kinds of facilities and the same kinds of student loads that we have in our buildings pull ahead in comparison to where we are. And that, I think everyone needs to understand. There are going to be repercussions from that. So we have to think thoughtfully about what we need, but we also need to understand where our neighbors are and what they're doing and how that works for them. So what does this all mean? We felt important that we present the board with, for the purposes of discussion and evaluation, several options and scenarios of investment to look at how to approach capital improvements with I'm gonna be honest, a very conservative eye. We were looking for massive swing at the fences kind of investments. We were looking at how to prudently constrain limited dollars and apply them to a huge universe of needs. So we started with the first option, which we think is the most conservative, which would be around a $19.9 million level of investment. And that investment would tackle about 70% of what I showed you on the site plans. So about 12 million of that $19.9 million would be focused on site work. 35% of the building improvements that are in priority one only would be 7.9 million, and that would be spread between high school, middle school, and the 4 elementary schools. Not a lot, and we'll go into more detail. This is the top of the pyramid, so bear with me. It's kind of like a table of contents. Option number 2, a moderate level of investment, would be about 29.9 million, where we would be able to tackle 90, almost all of the site improvements that we showed you on the site plans. And about 60% of the priority one items, or about $13.8 million of building improvements spread across the 6 buildings. And then option 3 is tackling everything in the priority ones, but only the priority ones. And that would be about 39.9. So 17.4 million for site improvements and 22.5 for building improvements.
You don't have an option 4?
We didn't put one together. We did not.
This
not that we
seems to me
can't-
we need an option 4.
It's not that we can't contemplate that. Again, we are trying to be very constrained.
Understood.
What does that translate, like if we were able to pass, no option?
That's coming up too. Good question.
That was a big question, right?
It is a very good
good question.
I
Sorry.
told Tony I was gonna act as the, because I've seen the whole book.
Corral,
Yeah.
yeah.
You read the end.
I read the end.
I'll speed up so we get to the end.
Corral.
Sorry, no, it's okay, I just,
No, your
A
questions
great
are
question.
natural. I mean, they're
The big
logical.
conclusion at the end.
So option 1, the 19.9, the question, you asked a question about,
Hey, kids.
you asked a question about where the investment is. So in the high school, we'd be in option 1 at 19.9, investing about $7.2 million, which would get us about 65% of what was on the high school site plan. Very specifically, not doing the reconstructive work, but again, doing a mill and overlay on most of the major elements. And we would be eliminating the new parking areas at the bus atrium and at the bus loop. So that is a significant impact, but that would constrain our investment so we could get down to that 19.9 number. We would be significantly investing in electrical replacements in the building, HVAC modifications that are needed in the science rooms, replacing the PA system, reconstructing the original stairs from level 1 to level 2, and replacing second floor water heaters and pumps, among other things in the high school. At the middle school, we would get almost all of the site work, about 10% less than was identified, and that would be, as I was saying, only doing a modified reconstruction on the service road that comes in from 351. And we would be, very importantly, updating the restrooms in the facility, which are ancient. A new PA system, replacing the auditorium's air handling unit and adding an air conditioning to that.
So
Which I think is much needed.
this actually should say reduce plan by 10% and not to 10%.
That's right.
Okay. Because,
Good catch.
yeah.
Thank you. I'll make that change.
Yeah.
Miller Hill, pretty significant investment at $4.9 million. 3.5 of that is in window replacements for the original building, which have not been replaced since the 90 renovation, and were really a poor installation to begin with. So this is remove and replace all of the original window area, and that's a very significant investment. And the balance of that would be all of the site work we saw in the site plan. West Sam Lake, we would get $900,000 investment, and that would be the majority of what was on the site plan, with the exception of doing mill and overlay as opposed to reconstruction for a significant part of the west parking lot. George Washington, as shown on the site plan, and the bus garage, significantly, most of what was on the site plan, except not full reconstruction, a modified reconstruction plan. So about 60% of the cost of the full reconstruction.
I have a question. What's the time frame difference on the mill and overlay versus the full construction?
Versus time, we would complete them in the same time.
No, I'm sorry.
Duration, the
Yeah,
longevity of
lifespan.
life. A full reconstruction, I think we should be prepared to say it's a 20 to 25 year life cycle. Mill and overlay, 5 to 10. And it depends on the subbase. So when you take up it's like anything, when you take up the paint, you see what's underneath, because that's really what the wear course is.
Right.
If the underlayment is, subbase is deteriorated, it's not holding, that it will create variation, it makes the new layer you put on less stable.
That's a good question.
Option 2. So option 2 is a fairly significant jump in scope. That $10 million to go from 19.9 to 29.9 adds basically back all of the site work and full reconstruction as opposed to mill and overlay. It gets us basically everything that was on every one of the plans that with only a couple exceptions, and they're minor. It adds significant improvements at the high school. We go up to $14.5 million of investment at the high school. It allows us to refurbish the boys and girls restrooms throughout the building and refurbish the high school boys and girls locker rooms, which are in desperate need of refurbishment. Ceilings, lockers, plumbing, they're past their useful life, and they have deteriorated significantly, been damaged quite a bit. They really need to be replaced. Every kid in the school goes through uses those facilities. At Algonquin, we would be able to add some pretty significant ventilation and air handling improvements, exhaust fans and louvers, and putting in building controls. It really improves the health and safety of the building. That's a major part of the increase at the Algonquin building. There's no change at the Miller Hill building in this scenario. West Sam Lake, we would add, in addition to improving the site improvements nearly to the full plan, we'd be adding the reconstruction of the chimneys for the 1935 and 1967 brick chimneys. At Post and Kill, we would add in library window replacement, and toilet exhaust, and LED sensors in the gym. George Washington, we would do all the site work plus replace significantly deteriorated heating piping in the basement. That's a big problem. Those pipes are ready to break at any time, and it's been a constant problem for us. And that's a building we lease to BOE, so we have to be able to provide that infrastructure to them. So we're either replacing it and repairing it as a part of the operating budget, or we're doing it as a capital improvement, which is far less expensive to the taxpayers and fiscally far better for us to do. So we're adding that in.
We can't pass any of that cost on to BOCES, right?
The gym section
It's not passing on, it's charging them more.
I mean, is that,
You could do that.
I mean, not to be like bitter or mean, like.
Maybe
that's just
superintendent's
genuine,
fine.
like- Well, I mean, because if this was the private, right, if this was the private commerce, that's what happens, right?
If the table's preparing, you better pay.
Yeah, get passed through.
Yeah, like, the Big Mac is more expensive in like downtown, wherever.
Well, we haven't raised the rent since we closed the building to our students, and that was 15 years ago now.
Really? Wait, is it been 15 years already?
Yeah, it was my first year on the board, we closed those buildings.
Who sets the rent rate?
It's in the lease.
We have a lease agreement.
Call Jeff.
So I'm just gonna say, we'll, glad we brought that up. Let's back burner that for this conversation. I like it, but, okay.
The last item on this particular option is just to increase the level of investment for the site work at the bus garage to 1.9, which would give us the full restoration of all the reconstructed activities. Jumping to the full priority ones, all of the 39.9, we add even more building improvements now. So we basically at this point have gotten all of the site work completely funded. And now we're adding in other critical priority one items, replacing the dust collector and the HVAC systems at the wood shop, mechanical upgrades throughout the building, and a replacement and upgrade of the music room air handling unit, which needs to be replaced, which is also 27 years old. At Algonquin, we will be replacing unit ventilators in the science prep rooms, ventilation upgrades throughout the building, and classroom and hallway acoustical ceiling replacement. Again, a 20-plus-year-old finished improvement that needs to be replaced. In Miller Hill, we would add replacing the PA system. At West Salem Lake, we would add replacing the PA system. Same with Poston, Killinger, and Washington. And that's pretty much the additions.
TA systems must be a safety issue.
They are. They are.
Because obviously they were all put in at the same time. In each building, and then clearly they need to be replaced, and it would be a big tool for communication in an event of an emergency.
100%. And we would love to have the same systems in each one of the buildings, so we're not having one system in one building, another system in another building. When you buy it together, it just makes it so much cleaner. We would love to do that. So that's the three options. Now, those are investment options, and I don't call them costs for a reason, because costs, one now has a kind of negative connotation to it, but these are not just costs. You're making improvements to the building to increase longevity, maintain or enhance function, and to be able to have proper stewardship over the facilities. Those are all investments. And every developer, every property owner understands those are requisite, required types of activities. So they're really investments to maintain your facilities. What does it mean, though, for the taxpayer? Fiscal advisors kindly updated this because we've been crunching numbers pretty regularly to get to this presentation. And they gave us updated numbers today, which actually improved the scenarios because it reduced taxpayer impact by going with the most recent published figures of state aid for construction reimbursement. So it's literally hot off the press. Option number one, a $19.9 million investment, would generate $8.94 of annual tax impact for a homeowner with a base value of $100,000. We do that not because every homeowner has a $100,000 home. We do that because it's easy to multiply up as you apply that to your own home's value.
Do we have any data on the average home value in the district?
It varies. But we did do something like this when we went through the last capital project. We talked about this because there was quite a bit of back and forth related to making sure that we weren't, that we were cognizant of the economic diversity of the district, because there are folks at the way low end and then there are folks at the much higher end that can afford the impact where some folks cannot afford the impact. And so I would be the first one to admit I made what was in hindsight probably more callous comment of well, it was only, that only is, a word of privilege. So we do have some more recent data about that, but I don't know how current it is today.
Many districts use the concept of a median home value as opposed to trying to choose what a property value would be. It just says, measure it, here's the median, that's what we'll base it on. Half the people are above and half the people are below.
Do we have that, Ellen?
I'm sure we can figure it out.
Yeah, I don't have it offhand, but I'm sure we can find it.
I don't understand something with these numbers. Option number 3 is double of option number 1, but the tax impact is way more than double. So why is that?
Aidability is part of it, right? So there's a little bit difference there.
I'll say on that last step.
We have to do a deeper dive on an impact, so these are really fresh.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a chance to walk through it with fiscal advisors, so we just put it in. But these, by the way, these numbers, and I've done the numbers with other districts, these are really good numbers for the values that we've got, and there's a couple of reasons why I want to highlight. The footnote's very important. One, these numbers are based on the value after STAR. The borrowings are based on 15-year bonds, which is very standard for renovation. It's based on our building aid ratio, which is 77.9%, which for many districts, in comparison, that's a very good number. It's not 95, but that's a very good number. But probably the best thing the board has done in preparation for this with district administration is set up a capital reserve. And applying $2 million to this dramatically reduced the impact of the local taxpayer. One of the best things the district could have done in foresight, and now it's coming to the benefit of the taxpayers.
Can you just elaborate, like, would it take too long to unpack the math on that? Like I was.
We can at the discussion on Monday. I'm not prepared to do it
Yeah,
today,
not now, yeah.
but there's a lot of unpacking to get there, but I can show you the math.
Well,
Yeah.
but if you look at the $2 million off option 1, that's 10%, and off option 3, it's only 5%. I mean, so that makes a big difference right there.
For benchmarking purposes, one more statistic that's on this sheet that I wanted to bring to your attention. We wanted to give you a reference point. If we took all of the BCS items, so all priority 1s through priority 5s, at $114 million, almost $115 million, that number in terms of impact was $137.19 for a $100,000 home with STAR. So again, that's a good kind of measurement barometer in what it means, and why we didn't say we should look at the whole BCS and put that on the table for discussion today is
Because it's not linear.
it is not.
Okay.
It's not. And it never is, and this gets into the math of finance, which is a little bit different than the math of construction. So we can bring fiscal advisors in and have them do that, but I live in both worlds. I can speak both of them, but they'll do it better than I will.
Well, I mean, and so if I'm interpreting right, like, it does feel like the incentive, the pressure is to be more conservative, which doesn't make a ton of sense, like.
Well, it does if you're the state, right? So if you're the state, you're bearing the majority of the investment, right? So the state's saying, if you want more, local share is gonna be more. And that's kind of the way the system's set up. When you talk to the state education department, when the district comes in and makes its submission, it's often received as, well, you're asking the state to pay for this, so we have a big say in how it gets approved or doesn't get approved.
And we're getting our money back. I mean, we pay into the state.
We agree.
No, I know. Okay,
We
so-
agree. But that's why some of these formulas work the way they work.
Yes. So thank you to the board members, Michelle, and who else was on the building committee? Thank you, guys. I mean, Megan. A lot of good work, a lot of thought, obviously, a lot of listening, a lot of learning. So I appreciate that. I totally would support an option number 3. I would also potentially consider an option number 4, just because.
So you said historically, we asked that in the meeting, historically, it will be voted down. Would never surpass the $45 million mark.
Yeah, because I suggested that in the committee and everybody.
And they
was
said
like,
that it's
"I
not,
love it."
the likelihood of that passing is going, we talked about it, we'll look at the others, and they went through the numbers. Consensus was, we don't feel it will pass higher than 39 this year. and then we're back to starting over and revoting and then lose a whole.
That time is precious, yeah, because there was a big lag between the last two, so.
Is there a risk that 39 doesn't pass?
Of course,
and we have to
there's
go
always
back?
a risk.
Well, I mean, I guess how, like,
That's why he gave us, so we didn't have, so we had most of this information a few weeks ago, but this is all new, we asked for options from him.
well, I mean, I guess why I asked is like, do we pull sort of like, it's like, come on, like, do we sort of pull a Kathy Hochul where it's like, give us 50 million, no, okay, 39. And everyone's like, okay, that's much better, passes. I'm not advocating that 100 million %, but I'm wondering like if we don't get 39, where does that put us?
I don't, but I don't see how we don't go for the 39 because all we are doing by 1 or 2 is perpetuating how we got here in the first place. And my reasoning beyond we need to even breach the 39 is that we're doing the bare minimum. And let me just look at this from like a risk management perspective, because that's my field, is what I do. We're talking about not even just in category 1, but category 2 as well. These are hazards. We are going to end up with the community coming out of pocket to prevent losses, or we will have losses. So you really have to say, you know, look at what it is. I don't want to hear about East Greenbush because they get historically 20% more funding than us every day of the week. So good for you guys. But where we are, we either pay to prevent losses or we will have losses. So you're gonna pay or you're gonna pay. And what would you rather pay for? It's the safety of your own children, it's the safety of your grandchildren, it's the safety of our teachers, it's our safety of our other staff that are here day in and day out. We cannot not do option 3. That's my opinion.
Well, does that also put us on our back feet, if lower enrollment is an issue? And, I don't want to get into how much everybody else is getting lots of money, that's our competitors. But if we want people to move into the district and having facilities, so, if I'm not in social media too much, I don't like get out much. But, there's always rumors, there's always something. So if it does come out that, we're really just not setting up to take care of the facilities. Every time a kid goes in the bathroom in the high school, it's a thing, and now it's on social media, and then somebody who might say, oh, I'd love to move to Aero Park, but I heard the bathrooms were gross. And the door doesn't close when I try and, now we're compounding the enrollment issue as well. And
I almost think we're past the point of worrying about bringing people in so much as just preserving the safety for the kids that are already here. Like, we're already at extremes. So I think it will be our job to make the rest of the community understand what was presented tonight. Hopefully people will watch the video to understand that this isn't like, this would be nice. I remember that capital project with the pretty field and I got the pamphlet and I was so excited. But this isn't that. This is literally safety for the kids and teachers and not even extreme safety, the school shootings not have a proper PA system, and every parking lot here is exciting when we come to school every day. So I completely agree with Megan on number 3. This isn't, gee, I know it's tight, so we really gotta conserve, we're already there. So I fully support number 3 as well.
Can I just ask an awful question though? What does this mean if we don't do an option 4, which Michelle, guys, I understand where that it is coming from, because I was here when the last one had to take a second round. It was frustrating. But there's $59,000 worth of work waiting in the wings, gawking at us. So what does that mean for 5 years from now? How close is that $60,000 and how do you break up that $60,000?
Million.
60,000, oh my gosh. It's been a long day.
You're like, or
Yeah,
anyway,
like, so, I mean, that's kind of what we're not talking about is like,
yeah.
yeah, 39 million. Is there an option for,
Can I,
and, oh my goodness, 59 million more dollars.
the response I had when this came up in the facilities committee was that there's a lot of money on the table. And we have to think about what the voters perceive that they feel that they can support. And it's not my job to steer you one way or the other, but to try to give guidance to where I might have insight.
You live in the district too, right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make that clear for the record, that you are a
And have-
taxpayer
and
in
have-
the district.
Correct. I went to
Lifelong
high school
loyal
here.
friend.
Yeah.
I just wanted that very clear on record.
The amount of investment that we could undertake, it could be all of it, but how does that impact all the people that live in our community? Can that really be supported? What you don't want to have is to take the effort to put a proposition in front of the voters and have it voted down, because it wastes a whole bunch of time, it creates a lot of acrimony, and it's very hard to figure out how to resurrect, because you still need to do the work. So you have to repropose something, and you have to get people to support it, and it's hard. So making the right ask is an important thing.
Right.
We can master plan the 5-year building condition survey and look at a way to strategically try to approach the priority twos over the coming 10 or 15 years. Some of those things are gonna have to happen sooner. I can't tell you today, in 2024, that some of that $60 million doesn't need to be addressed in 28, 29, or 30, or 31, 32, 33. Knowing that today is a little bit of crystal ball kind of stuff, right? But we can look and stratify what's in that next $60 million and then try to give a forecast of when it really might come up so that we can think about the master plan. And again, I think voters are more likely to be supportive the more they know that thoughtful considerations are put in place, so that you're not over asking, you're not just throwing things at the wall. I'm not suggesting you are, but the professionals that advise you think about how to be strategic. And I think that's the next step in this. And we haven't gone that far because candidly, we thought the $39 million, I said, that's a lot of money.
And to that, in the meetings, Carrie has always been very thorough in explaining how the capital projects roll off and getting the next one teed up and set up. And so you guys are, I mean, I'm gonna give credit where credit's due, you guys are actually looking at that in advance. And the things that are not on the table tonight are not something that would be critical before, foreseeably critical before this project, and we would have to start talking about that next project in 29, is the way it was explained to us in the
That's
committee.
helpful. Thank you.
I
That's
think
very
that
helpful.
you have made it really clear that, or it's very clear to me that you have prioritized only what has to be done. And I think a lot of voters will trust the fact that you went to school here, you had your kids here, you're invested, you have personal investment. And in addition to that, to go beyond, while an option 4 would be lovely, we're in a really volatile, unstable, uncertain point with funding from the state. And hopefully by the time priority 2 comes around, we'll at least know where we're headed, because like you said, we're not alone. And if half the schools in the state, the roof starts falling on the kids, all of a sudden we're gonna get a pot of money and I don't want them to fall on the kids, but hopefully the money comes sooner than later. So to push for more than that now, especially given how expensive everything is, I want our ask to be genuine when we say this is literally bare minimum to get by, and we're hoping for more, but we know that we can't ask more for right now.
Yeah. But they can call Kathy Opal.
Yeah. Well, we
That
gotta
number's
start
right there, posted online.
Yeah, we started with her.
I think the framing of like the conservative nature of like people wanting to go conservative, like rather than focusing on the dollar amount, needs to be reinforcing the risk management piece that you're talking about and reinforcing the strategy of like, these are safety structural things that we can't keep kicking the can down the road. And so framing it like this is still the conservative.
Yeah, considering we need $114 million.
Right.
This is
So
conservative.
that's gonna be important to reinforce rather than this isn't an aesthetic upgrade, but these are critical.
Well, I think the people who have kids in the school get it because they're at the schools every day. A lot of this stuff is obvious, like the potholes, the flooding,
Jim, is this presentation, is this packet public? Like, it would be for anybody that came through the door, but. will that
Yeah,
be-
we'll have it up tomorrow.
Okay.
The meeting's being live streamed.
I got one edit. Dude, we scoured it so many times, I can't even.
Yeah, we're not doing like a community engagement meeting about this now though, right? It was literally just.
Yeah, the agenda for, when we projected out the community engagement meetings, this meeting was, and we kind of did a rough outline, it was going to be the capital project. So when we kind of did this, we combined those into one piece, we wanted to have the whole board here.
Yeah.
So.
And I also think we need to sell this to the employees in the bus garage and those people, the employees that live in the district, because some of the feedback I received at the last one, it was also when the town Post Hill was going through the PFOA stuff. And feedback from an employee at a town board meeting was, I got yelled at because we were doing something in one of the buildings. I forget exactly what the individual pointed at in terms of our improvement, but our kids were drinking nasty water.
Okay.
So, but at this point, they
To be
can.
clear, we never let our kids drink nasty
Of
water.
course,
For the people at home, that is not true.
Of course.
No, we never let
But-
them drink
but
absolute water.
My
God.
concern is, and now I think the perspective might be different because they can see, like, in the buildings they work in, have been improvements over the last several years. I mean, because that was when, 2021?
When we just did
With
the,
the PFOA
yeah,
stuff.
in the middle of the nightmare, yeah.
So,
Still, I think the point of the optics of it, like we're talking about, and as I remember, I do recall on social media the year that the budget got voted down, the discussion on, on social media was, why are we looking at a budget to extend fields and keep locker rooms when, COVID is still happening in our kids can't play sports? So even though there was clearly more going on in terms of what, what the money was going to, the optics of it from the outside looked like, well, that's frivolous if our kids, can play.
Shiny fields with
Right.
insured income for the community. It was just really bad timing and bad presentation.
agreed.
Well, but again, the fact that this document here is public and that people can see, what kind of the whole hub looks like. And hopefully that indicates, that we are being mindful of.
And we also can publish a list of 384, correct? With the
Yeah.
priorities on those.
Yep.
And
We would.
I don't want to bring this up again because I hear Megan's point, but we got, what was, if anyone knows, what was the decision process to get us to where we are now, where we just mandated? Is it just that we were hoping for more funding and stuff? I don't know who, if any of you know.
I'm gonna suspect that the motivations behind prior projects were always to go the option one route, the most fiscally responsible route, every single time. But if we were to do that this time, we would also be kicking the can down the road for some very critical things. And so, to Tony's point, having lived here your entire life, and I haven't, so I will defer to what you said, is that historically, the community has always picked the most fiscally responsible option. So prior boards probably went with the most fiscally responsible option, and things just tend to bubble along the way.
That's why I asked the longevity of it.
Yes.
So we saved, potentially, 20 million, but we advise us 5 years.
Yes.
20,
Fix it right the first time.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately
It
what
can
they
be
did, is
penny-wise,
that now it's
penny-wise.
washed.
And arguably the most fiscally responsible at this point.
Oh, is it number 3?
Yeah.
Hands down.
Is that, how long?
Ending my 7th year.
Do you remember? Like, does that sound right with what Megan says?
Yeah, I think the climate in the district and the community, more so than anything else, was very different at different times, right? There's,
I could
referred
say
to,
2013, it was very different
Very
than it is today.
Oh, yeah.
Very different.
there's been a lot of things that have happened here. And I think that's guided decisions that have been made by administration and boards in terms of trying to be measured in terms of going forward in a way that is financially prudent.
The district had several master plan and long-range planning committees that looked at lots of things. Building infrastructure and building life cycle program and expansion, growth and contraction of enrollment, all kinds of things over the years. But many of the decisions were, as Megan was saying, were focused on the most fiscally tight selection based on aid that was available at that time. So in 2007 and 2013, we leveraged what was called Excel Aid, which was a kind of a gift from the state that allowed districts to highly leverage those funds and reduce the impact of the local taxpayer. So with a relatively small amount of state funds, we were able to have two referenda between 2006 and 2013, create close to $20-some million, $26 million of investment with no impact to the local taxpayer. And that drove, for sure, the discussion. How do you do it without?
Wouldn't it make sense though, if you have that much higher level of aid to actually go the other direction and spend?
No, I think in 2013, we were coming off a year or two where the budget didn't even pass. So there was a
Oh,
lot
okay.
going
That was
on
the
there.
ripple of the recession.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there were buildings being closed, there was.
it was a lot, it was a lot.
So for those boards, they got the biggest bang for the buck that they could get without having an impact to the taxpayer. So that was a very prudent decision in that time frame with that perspective.
And we don't have that now.
If I could ask just one question so that I understand the way that this is broken down. For the option 3, that annual per $24.09 per 100,000 in home, basically, is on top of what the current project and tax structure is. If we were to then at some point piggyback off of that, we would be able to carry forward without potentially additional. So like if we go with option number 3 and then queue up for the additional so that we're always kind of feeding into another project, we could potentially do so without it going above this for extended period of time.
What's a 15-year bond, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so there's two different answers to that. One, we'll continue to fund the capital reserve going forward, which will help future projects. The other thing is, right now, we don't have a project coming off. Our next project that comes off, if you look at the schedule, but it's a few years away. So it's quite possible that the project after this one could catch some of that debt coming off. So that's really what you try to do, is get into a cycle where you have debt falling
Yes.
off and then debt coming on. We're just not in that spot right now, but it's possible if we keep doing it with these projects, then that will start happening.
That's our goal.
Right.
And just to clarify, what that does is that mitigates the impact of that $24.
That's right.
Feels like less because some of $8 from the previous is actually coming off.
Right, so you're supplanting, like, the $8 from that last project, and you have $8 from the new project, so it's kind of.
And that's why getting in
offsets a
these
little bit.
cyclical maintenance kinds of capital referendums as opposed to recovering from deferred maintenance massing, which is where we are now, but getting in that steady eddy kind of every 5 to 7 or 8 years makes a big difference.
Can we consider doing the next, well, hopefully the 39.9 will pass. Can we consider doing the next one in like 3 or 4 years as opposed to 5?
That was my point. That's exactly kind of where I was going.
We'll look at that in the master plan
Yeah.
process I talked about. We'll definitely look at that and what part of the priority 2s will become kind of urgent and critical in that time frame and how to level that out. That's a,
Pull those
we'll call it
forward a little
smoothing,
bit.
right?
Yeah.
Smoothing the impact.
And is that, because with the one that we're in now, that, that 100,000, like here, you guys were able to use to shunt some of the things that we weren't able to get to with the plan that was rejected, right? Some of those things that were in that rejection, which sounds terrible, you were able to do with that annual 100,000. Is that, am I right?
Yeah,
So
that's
they're
very,
little-
very small project,
Yeah.
so that's, for the past few years, there's been attempts to raise it to 250,000, it's $100,000, just really doesn't buy us that much anymore. So we're not gonna be able to take off a lot of the list using the annual $100,000. But we'll continue to do them, but it won't make a big impact.
The other piece of this is that if we get ourselves on a particular cycle, I should say if we don't, if we do not go with option 3 and get ourselves moving on a particular cycle, we will never be able to get to a place where we can offer better program, facility. Like, we're doing basic maintenance at this point. So there were a fair number of people that spoke up after the original capital project didn't pass, that were disappointed about some of the programmatic changes that they were looking forward to. The pretty shiny stuff that we like to talk about, the stuff that makes the kids feel good and prideful about where they go to school. We will never get to do any of that if we don't embrace this particular challenge and go forward as a community together. It will never happen for them.
Anybody else? Any questions? Thank you guys. I would say, like, as ever, you guys are amazing. And it's just lots of very good, clear information for the lay people. So thank you. And thank you, Michelle and team. Thanks for all for the work. Jesse, did you?
No.
If there's information that you need prior to the discussion, let us know. Otherwise,
So-
the plan would have a discussion on the next meeting in June and then vote on the.
Which is Monday.
Yeah.
Which is like 4 days later.
Same thing, process.
Marinate on this for
I will be
Monday.
here Monday and vote. I'm in favor of option 3, but if I wasn't.
So there's no
We're
vote
not
on
voting
that.
on Monday.
Oh, all right.
That's
We built in an extra discussion time.
But before I vote, I would love to see the median house
Yes.
price, if we
Yes.
can get that, if it's not hours of work for you.
It's tricky because we are over 7 towns, and so like the median house price for Sand Lake is not necessarily the median house price for Fulton Hill
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So it was tricky. I remember Mike Leamet doing like a whole thing, and wasn't there a link on the district site that you could actually go in and calculate your individual impact?
It is extraordinarily tricky here, yes.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky.
So if we did option 3 and it got voted down, there's a delay, then we would go to option 2, then we would go to option 1. Is that how it works?
I think if we get voted down, maybe do an exit survey and figure out why, because I'm not willing to roll over that quick.
No. Me either.
No, I mean, obviously, we need to do a hard education piece to the community, to the voters.
Yeah, you gotta sell it.
Yeah, well, they wanna know why, that's fair.
Yeah, for sure.
If I can add, I think the most important thing is once the board chooses what the scope and the investment is, that the very next step is to make sure that we have a very well-informed voting community. So we do everything we can do to get the information out about what, why, how, the
Not
alternatives.
sticking it in the inside.
And that needs to be done in a short period of time, July, August, and September, 3 months.
How much do we already have in visual aids in terms of this, like pictures of
Lots.
West Sand Lake being like the parking lot, because I think that goes a lot further for people to see that visual versus people like, looking at.
Like,
oh,
oh, parking lot.
Yeah.
We can invite the public too, for there's part of the voter base that's our parents of students, and there's part that's not. And give them an opportunity to come and see the facilities and do tours and walk that. Those are all ways to get the community to understand there's a real reason behind the ask.
That's all
I
we can
agree, but
do.
we need to be able to figure out how to invite them, because advertiser isn't a thing anymore. And to reach the broader community, we have a great email system, but you have to be involved in the school some
I wonder
way,
if
shape,
each
or form.
principal would give a presentation.
That would be
Give a
helpful
tour.
too, that would be helpful.
We can do that. We can give tours. It's just, we've got to get the right people.
But how do you get to
Get
the community to invite them? That's my point,
Well,
like how do we reach
engage
them?
community organizations, invite them to either host us or host them. We can utilize social media. There's lots of people on social media.
I say sporting events, if it's.
Well,
engagement,
well,
for
that's
sure.
summer
You
though.
gotta.
He said it's the summer.
No, they don't.
Yeah, but you
Sporting
got
events,
stuff, but
there's summer.
But think of
All
all
the
the
back to school
PTA
nights.
stuff, the PTA does the ice cream night.
Ice cream social, yeah.
I would expect a well-oiled September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of meetings in September.
September.
so. I mean, we just.
Yeah, I definitely agree, like, end of July, August is probably not gonna get a lot of traction. Because even if people are
Well-
around, they're not.
Traction or not, you can't be silent and then hit them hard in September. So we need to start immediately with informational things going out and then host several events in the month of September to make sure everyone is up to speed.
And like personally, as like a member of the community who has kids, like coming to a facilities tour, I think you're gonna have a harder time getting people to come to that versus figuring out ways to get visuals to events that they're already at.
Yeah.
Like going to events that they're at instead of trying to get them to come to an additional event just for this, because there's not buy-in already. Why they should show up for that.
I mean, give me a milk crate and I'll stand up for the platform and Miller's. We could get a table in front of Miller's and talk to the community coming in and out. We could have a table in front of Stewart's and talk to the community coming in and out, just like people do with the Girl Scout cookies, and talk to them about the information.
Well, I assume that we would put would put some kind of packet at all the libraries like we do with the budget as well.
Yeah, we have a meeting set up with our current communications person as well as Brian already to begin the communication plan.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm worried because of how little community involvement we've ultimately got on the name change. I mean, that's a sensitive subject and it's kind of its own thing. But it's just a lesson, I think, and we gotta do something different to get the community involved. I don't know what to the extent the kids went, but the community involvement was much lower than I thought it would be. Yeah, but here we need them to vote, we need them to vote on this. Right.
But essentially,
saying.
it was the mailing list that we had, which people opted in to be involved with the district
Right.
community.
As far as
And-
voting communities
Sorry.
go, yeah, sorry.
And the majority of people that are just opposed to increasing my taxes for school, my kids are out of school. They're not on that list, so those are the people we need to reach.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I like your idea, the Cumberland, or the store, that corner up in, on where 66 and, what's it called? It's
Cummies?
Oh, well, Cumberland and Sand Lake
Cumberland,
Merchant is
Sand Lake
across the
Merchant.
street.
Yeah, and then this, the Hannaford and West Sand Lake are two.
I can't go to Hannaford and West Sand Lake without somebody stopping to talk to me, so I might as well set up a table outside.
But I really think it needs to be like a board, like, or maybe even at the site of each school, like if there was some sort of board that you put up when you're dropping your kid off.
But we're not,
that you
we're
could
trying to
see.
get the people who aren't parents.
Right.
So
Right,
that's not, they're not gonna be there.
right, but I mean, just even in
But
terms
that's
of,
another way to hit the
Right.
parents, to remind them to vote.
Yeah, and right in the
They're all
community.
audiences.
Important.
Well, parents, we can send, I mean,
Yeah,
we get a lot of paper at home,
But
but
I,
still.
but I also think doing something visual is good.
There's 14,000 plus registered eligible voters in the community, and we had less than 1,000 that showed up for the budget vote, and consistently, the voter turnout is particularly low, and I think to Adam's point, it's because we're not engaging the people who are not parents of the school community. Those folks go grocery shopping, those folks go to the post office, they go to Stewart's. There's a whole gaggle of them that sit in Stewart's and have their coffee every morning. We need to go to them.
do we have any data about the people that do show up to vote? Is that disproportionately parents or other community members, or we don't?
I'm gonna assume that it's a lot of the most engaged folks who are part of the school community, and then a very small fraction of people who just stay informed, because if you've got 14,000 eligible registered voters, and we have who came out to vote for a budget vote, even in the most contentious budget votes, where we had, you know,
What's it when you guys were?
when
South of 2,000.
That was a
that was,
24.
that is still, yeah, that was still a fraction of who could have come out to vote.
Well, not even the whole school community is voting.
Right.
Well, I mean, and I don't even know what those ratios are in other like semi-rural communities or like, so we, I don't know, I mean, that could be, nationwide where unless it's like the presidential race, very, very small
I can
percentage.
tell you
So
right
there's
now-
an extent to which we're
Yeah.
pushing, we're pushing a boulder uphill. We do have, we have the new communications person, we have Brian, who we still have access to despite his move over to BOCES. And so I would say that whatever we can do as a board, Jim, to jump on to, with their guidance, all of us will try and be in some places where we can be helpful, and reach the, whoever we can. And, at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, right? And if somebody doesn't vote, you can only control what you can control. We'll do our best to help the administration get the word out.
So there's
Yeah.
not a requirement of a particular percentage of those voters have to, it's like, we need to know that whoever does show up to vote understands why this is important as well. Like, I would love for more people to vote in general, but first and foremost, those that do, to really understand what they're voting on and why it's important.
Project's a simple majority, not a super majority.
Yeah, I think so. Right, I mean, so ultimately the math, if like 100 people showed up and 51 of them voted for option 3, then there
So
we
keep
go.
it secret.
I do not know.
You don't know everybody.
Just kidding.
There's 7 of us. Tony.
I think getting to your point though about like, if we put things where only parents are going to see it, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing if we know that parents are gonna show up and are tired of, being in the backup line of the middle school and they're annoyed enough to come and vote, then great.
Oh my gosh, especially like EMS, you put a sandwich board there, how much do you hate sitting in this line?
Right?
How much do you hate sitting on 66?
Yeah.
If you voted,
Vote for the budget.
Yeah, if
Vote
there was
for
a
the
billboard right
budget,
there, like
your
this is
kid would
what-
already be in your car.
The voter apathy is not limited to just our community. I know someone who works in another district that's even much larger than ours, and they proportionally only had a slightly better turnout than we did. My point, though, is that I think largely there are a lot more people that are impacted by the decisions that we make than what we hear, and I struggle with that low of turnout because how do we even know what we're doing is correct if they're not telling us? We work for the community and we don't even know if the community knows what we're doing or approves of what we're doing. It's no voter turnout is no employer feedback. We work for them and we're not getting any kind of evaluation.
Well, and again, the soapbox that I get on every time is what we do affects them, right? So if we nickel and dime, if we keep sort of being penny wise and pound foolish, and there is serious deterioration, like, that reflects on our property values. So if you don't have a kid in the district and you want your home to retain its value, and you just investing in the schools, there's literally no better investment. Maybe a new kitchen and a good school. And some nice siding, but the school.
And that's how you get the non-parents to be in favor of this,
Exactly.
because they see the benefit.
We want-
Show them that case.
And I,
Everybody needs, we all need each other.
I want
Retired
everyone's
people
property
need
value.
school kids.
Yeah.
School kids need retired people.
Thank you.
You guys, thank you so much. I don't want to, if anybody else wants to keep going, I'm happy to keep going, but everybody good? All right. We don't have anything else on the agenda here, right? So I just need a motion to adjourn. Tell me how you really feel. Adam and then Megan seconds. Thank you, Carrie. All those in favor? That is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Just all